talk about right. Today we're going to talk about a very important organ. We have talked about the thyroid, we've talked about the kidney, we've talked about the pancreas, the GI tract, we've talked about the brain, mental health, the kidneys. Everything has been talked about apart from the liver when we talk about major organs. Okay, the liver. Yes, most people do think of as a filtration organ. So let's just establish what it is. The upper right quadrant. So let's get everybody a little bit more technical. The whole body is split into quadrants: upper right, upper left, lower right quadrant, and that's good for diagnosis. If you've got a problem and you want to ask a question, you can identify where the pain is by using that. So anyway, the liver is in the upper right quadrant. It weighs about 1.5 kilograms and it amasses to 2% of your body weight. So it doesn't take up much of your weight. Okay. Just things you need to know. So the functional subunits of the liver are called lobules. That's right. And by the time of this video, you should have an illustration because they're rather amazing. They're hexagonal-shaped structures. So they don't even look like the sort of natural cell that you imagine. And there's about 50,000 to 100,000 of them in the liver. And the liver is actually divided into four main categories. The filtration and storage of blood is one of their functions. Metabolism and detoxification is the second one. Bile formation, very important. See, it's the third one. And regeneration is a very important one. The liver is amazing. And when you hear about regeneration, people were very surprised. When you have part of your liver taken away in an operation, they can take up to 70% and still expect it to regenerate. So that is amazing. So that's from evolutionary processes that this important organ is so important it can regenerate. So unlike the kidney, for instance, which does have millions of nephrons, and you can lose a whole kidney, but it doesn't regenerate. The liver does. So that's a really big thing to bear in mind. Okay, so let's look at the first category, which is filtration and storage of blood. As you can see from the drawing we're going to add to the video, there are two large vessels that come into the liver. And the first one is the large portal vein. Okay, so veins tend to have deoxygenated blood. Okay, that's why they're blue. And that vein is coming up from the GI tract, and it's been draining nutrients and substances, and you get about 1,000 mils of blood going in to that area. And then you've got the hepatic artery. Arteries tend, in the main, we'll talk about the heart, which we've done a video on, they tend to be oxygenated and they've got hemoglobin, that's why they're red. And that's coming from the celiac trunk. And that's, like I say, oxygenated blood, and you get about 300 mils of blood there. So there's about 1,300 milliliters of blood at any one time in the liver, which accounts for something like 10% of the blood that's in your body right now. So if you remember, the kidneys, much smaller organs, they have 22% of your blood. So they really are compressed and pushed for their blood storage. But the liver is a big organ, and there's a lot of turnover there. So it's pretty interesting. So when you look at these hexagonal lobules, each sort of corner has a connection to the portal vein and also to the hepatic artery at each corner. And basically they can either be branches or direct connections, and they drain into this lobule, this sinusoid is called. And then from each corner, there's a central vein where all of that goes into. So these sinusoids, they're porous, they have many holes, and they're lined with epithelial tissue. And this regulates what goes in and what does not go in. So that's part of the filtration. And this makes much more sense when we've got that illustration on there. So in addition to that, there's also what's called macrophages. And these cells, they sit in the sinusoid, and they're there to engulf bacteria or invading pathogens. So even at the liver's point, we can still be thinking, is there bacteria, are there pathogens in the blood? And that's why those macrophages are there. And they check the blood, and they try to devour these bacteria, any pathogens, and then that blood finally moves to the hepatocytes, all right, these plate-like cells, which can either metabolize the blood, detoxify it, or use it to produce bile. So I don't want to talk about those other things. I want to stick with the first thing, filtration and storage. So yeah, all these central veins are the lobules. So they come together. Forms the hepatic vein, which leaves from the superior area of the liver and merges with the inferior vena cava, which is a thing we talked about in the heart. So that goes right up, and it's the right side of the heart, plugging into sort of the middle of the heart. And there is a reason I've mentioned that. So this liver has a flow of blood coming out. It's very low pressure. And it has between 400 milliliters, 500 milliliters of blood in it, which is around 10% of your blood. So this is a very important storage area. So if the supply to the heart, it goes in, and if you haven't seen a video about the heart, maybe look at that first, just dial back if you can't remember or you haven't seen it. It goes in, and then it could hit the tricuspid valve. And if that's hardened, then the blood can actually back up and back up and back up until it gets back into the liver. And that actually does happen. And that 500 milliliter storage of blood can go up to as much as 1 liter. So that's why heart health and the liver health, they can be a little bit intertwined, and we'll be looking at connections between all the organs and how they can impact on each other. So you could have a healthy liver at first if you've got a problem with your heart. And like I say, that tricuspid valve is hardened, for instance. That's a really good example. Then it backs up the blood, and your healthy liver can be affected by an unhealthy heart. This is why we try to look at everything in the body as a sort of system, holistically, really. So that's the storage and filtration. It's very, very, very simple how it filtrates. It's got lots of different layers of going through, macrophages, those sort of things. And then you get into metabolism and detoxification.